Hey folks, just a few quick thoughts on Plato's Apology. The first thing that I wanted to clarify that may not be obvious to people is that apology, coming from the Greek, translates out actually as the defense of Socrates. And that's how you should be thinking about this. I mean, as you read it, he's not really saying, I'm sorry. It's more like, I'm sorry you guys are a bunch of idiots because you don't get what I'm talking about. No, this is his defense. And so, really, the number one thing that we should be thinking about is his defense successful? Now, practically speaking, it is not, in the sense that he is executed, he's convicted and sentenced to death. Um, but but I think it's worth asking: is Socrates' goal here to be found not guilty, to survive? Because as you read through his defense, his questioning of his accusers, it doesn't really seem like he's giving his best shot to not be killed. He's giving his best shot to prove a point, and this might be the artistry of Plato in recounting this. And it's a um, I don't want to say it's fictional, but it's Plato's spin on the trial of his teacher, Socrates. And so clearly Plato is trying to prove a point about Socrates. And that point may not have been that Socrates was trying to get off the hook and and failed and then was killed. In fact, the Platonic dialogue that we usually read after the Apology is the Crito, where Socrates' friend Crito comes to him in prison, says, "Hey, I figured out how to get you out. We're going to smuggle you out. We're going to ship you across the sea, and then you'll be able to survive and live your life out in exile." And Socrates is like, "Nah, like no, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to die." Because to continue one of the themes from the Apology, to leave and live in exile, to abandon my community, to not play my role in my community, would be a life not worth living. And so, we're left to think, well, is Socrates playing his role? Is he winning by losing? Is he winning by presenting these arguments? And if so, what is his ultimate sort of goal here? And there are a few things. One is this idea, right, of life worth living. And I want you guys to be pulling this stuff specifically out of the text. I'm not going to read too much to you because I want you to be pulling out the parts that you think are important for the discussion forums. But I'm reading here: the life which is unexamined is not worth living. Right? That this is a central theme, and it comes up especially towards the end as Plato is as Socrates is sentenced, and he says, "You know what? The people who are really the losers here, you guys, not me. I'm going to my death, either a restful slumber or a meeting in the afterlife with all the dudes that I've always wanted to talk to. But you are stuck here living a unexamined, unvirtuous, unjust life, and what could be worse than that, right?" And this is something that the Greeks took very seriously, and you guys might want to consider it yourself. The idea of what would a life that's not worth living be, and it might be difficult for us to imagine. But I would throw out here, and this gets a little morbid, but imagine that uh, you know your whole family perished tragically, and it was your fault, right? Would you be able to live with yourself? You might say no. Or if you were in an army fighting for your country and you ran away, you deserted, would you be able to live with yourself? And that's essentially what Socrates is saying is, I couldn't live with myself if I didn't play my role for society. And that role is the gadfly. That role is the person who questions and shows all the received wisdom to be ridiculous, to be hollow, and shows that that we're going to wipe the slate clean and show that really all of the traditional sources of wisdom, religion, the poets, the politicians, that these people don't know anything, right? That they don't know anything, and that we need to find true knowledge, true wisdom, and rebuild society around that, right? Now, one of the things I like to say with is Socrates guilty? Is he, a victim here, or is he like the destroyer? Is he the destroyer of worlds? I actually find myself thinking a little bit about um, a certain president that we have that comes in and calls everything fake news, fake, the swamp, and all of the traditions, all of the customs, all of the norms of your government. They're all fake. They're all biased. Let's tear them all down and let the chips fall where they may. Now, right, this might be a little bit uncomfortable for some of you comparing our current president um, with Socrates. And yet, this idea of, all right, let's tear it all down because it's all false. And then you say, well, what are you going to put in its place? And Socrates says, I don't know. I know nothing. But, we can only find truth once we get rid of the bias. Once we pull back from all of these traditions that tell us, oh, I know what's true, right? That blinds us to the search for truth. So that's the first step. But, and in a sense, right, we're right now in a period of American politics where we are ripping down all of the traditions and all of the norms and all of the, well, why don't you, why don't you just not confirm a Supreme Court justice if you have the majority in the Senate? Well, because traditionally you don't do that. Well, why? Right? You can imagine Socrates like, why? And the president is like, why not? Right? We can do it. Let's do it. And in a sense, that I think that they both unmask a lot of the ways in which government works as just power politics. All right, there's a little bit of an uncomfortable comparison, but one might legitimately ask, well, what would Socrates have to show us in order to make it worthwhile, right? Let's get rid of religion. Let's get rid of democracy. Let's get rid of all of the structures that have organized our life, all the culture, all that. Let's get rid of it all and replace it with what, right? If you can't replace it with something better, something truer, if truth is something that we can never find, if there are no universal truths or none that we have access to, then what are we doing all this tearing down for? We're just going to have, chaos. Maybe the reason why we should stick with the traditions we have is because everybody knows them and we've been, getting by with them up until now, right? So there's a sense in which maybe Socrates really is the villain, really should be killed for disrupting and undermining Athenian society. On the other hand, right, it does seem like they don't really have any access to good reasons for why they do anything, and he does seem to show them to be fools. So maybe he clears out the rubbish, and then Plato, Aristotle, some of the other thinkers throughout that we deal with throughout this class, maybe they come in and they're able to show us, okay, right, now that we've started thinking rationally, reasonably, in one way or another, depending on your views about how we generate knowledge, maybe we found a better way of living, a truer way of living, a more just way of living, and we could only do that by clearing out the garbage. But it seems to me, at least partially, what we consider, how we view Socrates, whether he's a good guy or a bad guy, has to do with what you think the possibilities are for discovering truth, for discovering a better, more reasonable, more rational way of living, a way of organizing our lives and our society than just how things have been done before. All right, that's where I'll stop with this video, and my next video on the Republic will sort of frame it in terms of, all right, well, here's Plato in his great work trying to tackle this question of, all right, can we get past bias? Can we find truth? Can we find objectivity? Can we find universal values? In some ways, maybe that is the real defense, the real apology of Socrates. All right.